So Paul is writing here to Timothy, instructing him, who is one of Paul's first successors of the apostolic mission, that is the mission of the bishop, in giving him counsel. First of all, I ask supplications, prayers, petitions, thanksgivings, basically all things like of first note, of first importance. Offer your religious worship and your religious practice for kings and for those in authority. Seems like a strange thing. But it's not really, because Paul understands that our life as Christians in this world has actually nothing to do with the powers and principalities of this world. Our life as Christians is to be a sojourner through whatever nation we happen to be living in, identifying not as citizens of one nation or another, but as citizens of heaven. But passing through these powers and principalities of the world, we need to ask those powers and principalities to be kind to us, to leave us alone, not to kill us, not to oppress us, not to persecute us, not to nail us to crosses and use us to light their gardens at a dinner party like Nero did, right? And so both Peter and Paul tell us why we pray for kings and presidents and prime ministers. It's so that they will let us live our religious life, passing through this world, sojourning through this world, exercising mercy and patience and offering sacrifice in a peaceful way, to be left alone to worship God. This is something that we see God as trying to establish from the very beginning, right? He sets Adam up as the dominant person in the Garden of Eden to worship him, right? That's the whole reason that Adam is free and he is sovereign unto himself in the garden, so that he can worship God. And when the people of Israel, or when God's people, when humanity falls into slavery, as illustrated in Israel being made slaves in Egypt, he says, let them go so that they may worship me, right? This is our whole path, right? We can say that we're Americans in a practical sense, but we must not identify ourselves as Americans. We're Christians living in America, and thanks be to God for that, right? But we're no better than Christians living in Somalia, Christians living in China, Christians living in Venezuela. We are Christians, all of us, united under the banner of the cross of Jesus Christ, passing through this world with equal dignity as Christians, equal sovereignty within ourselves, freed from our sinfulness in this world and joined to Christ. And so Paul says to Timothy, offer your prayers for those in authority over us in the world, so that they'll leave us alone and we can do the more important thing, which is to lead a quiet and tranquil life in devotion and dignity. Right? Even for Christians who involve themselves in politics, this is the goal. It's not to make the world a better place. It's to make this world an easier passage for Christians to live a quiet and tranquil life in worship of God and the exercise of mercy to neighbor, so that we could pass through the desert of this life into the promised land of heaven. This also requires us then to take a different understanding of the way that we treat others, particularly those who with dissenting views, political views. So many times we flatten out those we call our political opponents, and we say they're bad because, they're an enemy because, they're an evil person because. Right? They're no more an evil person because than I am an evil person because of my sin. And they are no more my enemy than I am enemy to myself. There are no human beings in this world that are our enemy. if we understand what I spoke first, that I am a Christian living here at this time in this place, and there are Christians living now in other places, and they are not my enemy. And there are people in this world who are not yet Christians, though the Lord desires for them to be. They also are not my enemies, because the Lord wants them to be my brother. He wants them to be my sister. Perhaps they're mired in sin. Perhaps they do evil. But that does not make them my enemy. The evil they do is my enemy. And it hurts them more than it hurts me. And the Lord wants me to help save them from that destruction that is caused in them by their sinfulness. You see, they're lost sheep too. We were lost sheep once, mired in our sin, and yet we were ransomed. Enemies of God made his friends. And so every person in this world that we see as our enemy is misperceived by us. They also are lost sheep, whom the Lord calls and wants to be made a member of his sheepfold. We Christians cannot afford to let political partisanship make enemies of those who would be our brothers and sisters in heaven. That does not mean that we compromise in attacking evil where evil presents itself, but we do not attack the people who are lost, deceived, or even embracing what is evil. We exercise towards them the same mercy of the cross that Jesus exercised towards us in our sinfulness. Patience, compassion, kindness, sympathy, and a courage to speak a truth in a way that will draw them to Jesus, who is lifted up on the cross. And if we do that, then the evil that we hate so much that they do disappears, because it's not done by them anymore. And they are counted as a victory for us, a quiver or an arrow in our quiver, a credit to our account in heaven. So make supplications and prayers, petitions, thanksgiving. Offer them for kings and for all in authority. For these two reasons, then, that we might be reconciled with those we misperceive as enemies, and that we might live with them in this world tranquil lives dedicated to devotion toward the Lord and dignity in our conduct.